watched the film Amadeus, which details the life of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the famous musician protege of Vienna. Um, in the movie, it doesn't touch so much on his psychological problems, but it does kind of allude to the fact that he had bipolar disorder, depression, and was a bit of a narcissist. Um, in further research, he also had borderline personality disorder. Um, in the movie, it showed his crazy thoughts that weren't all the time coherent, especially when he was trying on wigs. Um, he liked all three wigs, and when he was trying to decide which one to get, he was like, well, why can't I just have three heads? Um, which isn't really something most people, normal people would say. And he was dead serious. He's like, well, why can't I just grow two more heads so that I could have two more wigs? And he had this crazy erratic laughter, which was so out of the place. It was high pitched, and he would just laugh at the most inappropriate times. He also had an extremely good memory. He was vain, conceited, very selfish, and he was a definite womanizer. Um, I mean, he loved himself to the point where everyone else was just secondary, and he would use them and just forget about them. Um, he had a bit of a dependent personality disorder. He had this strong need to be nurtured by others, especially his wife and his father. Because he was a protege, his father pushed him and helped him to grow as a musician, but he depended on that love. And even when he was an adult and on his own, he still went to his father for everyday questions and just help with everything. And when his father died, he was completely lost. He didn't know what else to do. Um, and then he married his wife, but basically used her as a pet. She would keep his house neat, give him sex when he wanted it, and leave him alone when he didn't. Um, and if she didn't tell him how much she loved him, so many times a day he would just lose it and say, well, why do I even bother with you? Why don't I just throw you out? And a couple times he did actually try to throw her out of the house, and the only thing that stopped him was their two small children. Um, the symptoms of borderline personality disorder that the movie emphasized as part of Wolfgang's um, personality was his impulsivity. He would just write music, and he'd sit down at a piano and just start writing notes, and sometimes they didn't really make sense, but he wouldn't fix them. He'd just move on, and he began to drink a lot later in life, um, and he had temper outbursts, and he would just get so upset with people if they didn't just take his word for what it was, and if they couldn't keep up with him intellectually. Especially if somebody was trying to help him with his music, he wouldn't even listen to them. He'd say, just shut up, you're stupid. Um, which he actually called them pigs and just these animalistic derogatory statements. Um, he he was a terrible overspender. He didn't realize that money that he had to work for money. Um, he just expected people to give it to him, even if he wasn't providing work yet. And at times this got him into a lot of trouble with debts and things, and he would go gambling. Especially later on, when after his father died, he sank into this depression, which didn't help or alleviate any of his drinking, and his overspending got worse because he was spending so much money on alcohol and prostitutes and things like that. And he had quickly shifting moods, and in one moment he would be um, just this comical character, and the next would be angry and violent. And this especially showed in his music. I mean, critics today still look at the pieces he wrote, and there'll be measures where he's just these joyful, uplifting, spiccato moments, and then all of a sudden he'll turn into this largo, depressing um, music, and it's very sudden, um, and maybe added a bit to his genius, but still was not a normal type of personality. And after he started his depression started worsening. He didn't care much about his appearance. It became very disheveled. He would work until the wee hours of the morning and then sleep and endlessly and then wake up, be late to things, which he was never late to anything for most of his life until his depression got got very bad. He actually began his debts got so bad, and he didn't want to work, so he actually began begging for money from patrons or even people he had insulted. Um, my favorite anecdote is he was going to teach the daughter of a man who owned lots of dogs, and he sat down at the piano and he began playing music for these dogs, and they quieted down eventually. But he um, he said to the father, he said, "Well, next time you want me to teach one of your dogs, give me a call," and walked out. And this same man, actually, later in life, he ended up begging for money from many times, just periodically going to the man and saying, "Well, do you have any other daughters I could teach?" Or just after he had called this man's daughter a dog, um, or the other term for female dogs, um, and he began to become a workaholic, but he wasn't turning out many pieces. So he would actually finish, very few pieces, but he was working constantly, 24 hours a day sometimes, and just going for days without sleep or food, or even talking to his wife or children. Um, but the depression was just so much that he couldn't take any pride in what he was writing. Um, and he would just turn out these things that would just, you could barely call them music. And the critics came after him, and that didn't help his depression get any better. And then his narcissism, um, when people were saying, well, you aren't turning out much music, he was just very proud, very vain, very conceited, and just said, well, I am Mozart. I can do whatever I like because I write great music, and just wouldn't listen to anybody else's opinion if they were saying anything even slightly negative about his work or his life or the way he was even raising his children or treating his wife. Um, and he would just do very strange things, um, and he would have any inappropriate humor at times. He was at a friend's funeral, um, and just all of a sudden burst out laughing. And when people asked him, "Well, Mozart, why are you laughing? Your friend just died. We're burying him. He's being put in the ground as we speak, and you're laughing." And he said, "Well, don't you get it? I mean, he's dead, but he's dead. He's just, I don't understand why this is such a big deal." And he kept laughing, and he just didn't understand why people didn't see this as a funny moment or experience. Um, and that's not generally called for at most funerals. You don't burst into laughter. And towards the end of his life, his thoughts became incoherent. He'd say things like, "Oh, pass the syrup," and then just freak out and say, um, "Well, I have to go visit my neighbor," but his neighbor was out, or he would think he had appointments when he really didn't, or he'd think he'd written a piece of music and then try to find it and it was gone. Um, and he was just very unreliable. Um, and when he actually was dying, he was in the midst of writing a piece. It was never finished, but he had an assistant who was helping him write his music, and he was just saying, "Oh, well, the tenors need to have this melody," and he would hum it and kind of go da 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 da, and expect the man to be able to pick up on it. He's like, "So you got it, you got it, you got it," and just move on, and wouldn't give the man time to write it down. And he would ask him, "Hey, can you slow down? Can you say this again more clearly?" And Mozart would just be like, "No, this is my music. This is Mozart. You should be able to get this," and just completely disregard whatever anyone else would say. Um, The movie did get a couple things wrong, however, um, with depression. He never showed the the early signs of depression. He was never um, given to any bouts of extreme sadness. For most of his life, he was very happy, very outgoing, well spoken at times, even if he was a little conceited. Um, but he never had those bouts of sadness. It was just all of a sudden he woke up and he didn't care about his music anymore, and his father died, and that was it. It was more of a major depressive episode than an actual depression. Um, and then while narcissism was extremely played out in the movie, there was no actual record of him acting in this way. Yes, he was a womanizer, but that was quite common in the time he was in, especially for someone who had been in the spotlight since he was 4. I mean, he played his first concert for Kings at the age of 5. His first composition was recorded and played in Vienna at the age of 6. He never really had a true childhood, and so because he was struck in the spotlight and people were fawning over him, he was very vain and proud because he just expected people to treat him like they had before. Um, and so that wasn't, I don't think it was a narcissism so much as a cultural just consequence of the way he was brought up and thrust into such a fame-seeking position at such a young age. Um, and then it alluded to the fact that his extremely good memory was somehow related to his borderline personality disorder. But in all the research that I did not find any link as to how that would be connected. Um, but I mean, it could be. It's just a symptom that is not very common, but it was, and I could not find anything in that. But I guess in closing, the Mozart that we picture, most of us at least, in popular culture is a shy, very brilliant protege, violin, pianist, musician, composer, when in actuality he was a bit of a crazy man. And here's the clip.
You merciful God. He destroyed his own beloved rather than let a mediocrity share in the smallest part of his glory. He killed Mozart and kept me alive to torture. 32 years of torture, 32 years of slowly watching myself become extinct. My music growing fainter, all the time fainter, till no one plays it at all. His.
Good morning, Professor. Time for the water closet. And then we have your favorite breakfast for you. Sugar rolls. He loves those. Fresh sugar rolls.
I will speak for you, Father. I speak for all mediocrities in the world. I am their champion. I am their patron saint. Mediocrities everywhere. I absolve you. I absolve you. I absolve you. I absolve you. I absolve you.